Welcome to the Breakthrough Story. The purpose of the Breakthrough Story is to look behind the scenes of successful individuals in Columbus, Ohio, to see what challenges and breakthroughs they experienced along their path to success. What obstacles did they face in their early stages of life, and what helped them break through those obstacles? What has helped them succeed, and what is something they did differently? These are some of the few questions we try to answer with the Breakthrough Story. This episode is brought to you by Orange Visuals. Orange Visuals is a one-stop shop listing and branding service for real estate professionals in Central Ohio. When you need to market yourself or a property, Orange Visuals provides all the services such as photo, video, brochures, single property websites, and so much more. Visit Orange Visuals today and see why top producing realtors choose to market themselves with Orange Visuals. Mike, thank you so much for joining us today for the Breakthrough Story. I'm excited to have you. I know your story, and it's a pretty interesting story to listen to. And I think that as people listen to this podcast, they're going to learn a lot of valuable things, especially your past couple of years in real estate. So I'm excited to hear it from you. Thank you so much for joining.
Thanks, man. Thank you for having me. And yeah, I guess it was really on my way here when it hit me that, this isn't more about me, but it's about, putting the story out there. Maybe if one person can get some help from it, some insight, just one little, tidbit, that's worth it for me, man. So Thanks for having me on, Tim. I appreciate it.
Yeah, and also congratulations today. You are launching your own real estate team, so it's pretty exciting. It's a good day today, even if it's cold.
Yeah, man. We're pretty excited. Today's the official launch day, so it's just kind of cool how these worked out date-wise. So. Yeah, man, I'm excited to get into it.
Yes, and although it is April 1st, it's no joke.
Yeah, very true. In my video earlier, I had to say that. I said, listen, guys, this isn't an April Fool's Day joke. This is real. We are officially live as of today.
Awesome. So before we get too far into talking about what you're doing today, I wanted to take it all the way back to the very beginning and talk a little bit about the struggles you had, the breakthrough that you had that would kind of set your course for where you are now. So can you tell us a little bit about where are you from, where did you start your life, and where were you in high school?
So November 18th, 1993, born Marion General Hospital up in Marion. Parents were in Columbus from the time, but mom and dad are back from the Valet and Steubenville area. They came here just kind of looking for work. Pretty blue collar class. Dad was always a salesman. Mom was a loan officer for as long as I could remember until the crash happened. But so yeah, man, born and raised here in Columbus since day one. That's why I'm such a diehard Buckeye. I'm always wearing something Ohio State or Ohio representing. So, but actually, I guess since kind of day one, I always kind of had my back against the wall. With my brother was born in '88, and I think it was in '90. My mom had a stillbirth. My brother would have been Shawn Michael. So now being a parent, I realized how tough that would be. But then to turn around, their next pregnancy was a miscarriage, I think 4 or 5 months into it. So when the fourth one, me, they found out they were pregnant. One, they weren't planning for it. Two, my mom's told me the story, she's like, your dad was crying. He was like, I can't deal with, another loss like that. And now being a parent, man, it's very eye-opening because growing up, I never really understood that or appreciated it. But now being a parent, it's just like, man, how do you go through that twice and then have faith in that fourth time, or that third time, I should say. And but I guess against all odds, and now today I guess they call it a rainbow baby, or back in the day it was just, a blessing, a miracle. So born with the cord wrapped around my neck fighting, they actually had to do an emergency C-section. So, like I said, man, I guess I really wasn't supposed to be here. So I've kind of always felt that I definitely had my back against the wall in that aspect. But growing up, great childhood, man. My parents gave me and my brother everything that they could. By no means were we rich or, high end. We were but average middle class, like I said, mom and dad always just working. So early school years, I loved school, man. I was on a roll all the way up until about 6th grade, I think. Stepping into 7th grade, started running around with the boys. You're in middle school, puberty hit. So it's at that point, everything kind of went from school to sports for me. It was football, it was wrestling, it was baseball, it was whatever we could do. And that's where a lot of my friendships that I still have today were formed, was through those 7th, 8th grade years of sports. And so I was just more into school for the sports at that point.
Really?
And, for the women, the girls, trying to be one of the boys.
So were you basically, that's all your whole world was, or were you maybe thinking and had aspirations in the future, like I'm going to become something, I'm going to achieve something in my life, or was it just I'm going to live for today.
Exactly, man. I think it's one thing, up until like my early 20s, it was just day to day. It was never, I always said I wanted to be like my dad. I wanted to be a salesman, but there was, nothing that it was like I wanted to be an astronaut or a president or whatever it was. I just kind of wanted to be like dad growing up, but I never really had that thing, that stood out to me that I was like, that's it, that's the goal.
What about your dad attracted you that made you want to be like him?
Oh, I mean, he was my superhero, man. He always has been. He was just from day one. I've always had mad respect for my dad, man. He grew up a rough life back in Steubenville, and he's been a part of the Las Vegas scene, Atlantic City, the tougher side of stuff. So that was one thing for me that I kind of always, I grew up. One of my favorite movies was Goodfellas, and it starts off with, I always wanted to be a gangster. So I kind of always had that little bit of a mindset, because my dad to me was, he was a badass, man. I wanted to be just like Dad, and so that's kind of where that came from. And to this day, he's my hero, 100%. Anytime, before I did this podcast, I called him. I was just like, hey, man, can we talk for a minute? So yeah, I guess that's kind of where that always came from, wanting to be like Dad.
That's awesome. So you had that aspiration, like, I want to be like Dad. That's basically your general guideline for life. But you mentioned in middle school, you started getting into friendships and started running around. What was life like then? Where did that take you? Like, because I know, having talked with you, it kind of led you down a path that you eventually had to turn from. Yeah. Can you share about, like, what led to that?
So, I mean, like I said, man, it was always sports for me. Middle school, pretty average, hanging out with the buddies, going to sports practices, finding out what, girls were and being attracted to them, and puberty hitting and all of that. So then when we stepped into high school, pretty much the same group of friends, but that's when everything really starts to change. Parties are now involved, and you get around certain, more groups of friends and stuff. But at that point, it was still, for me, sports and friendships. I think what really was a big impact in that was my sophomore year, or I should say end of my freshman year. We had a levy that failed, and they took all the sports away from our whole district. So there was no sports for over a year. Which, again, me and all my buddies were just sports background. We were like, what do we do? We ended up transferring out to a smaller school. So we went from a Division I, thousands of students, to a Division IV school, I think, out in London. Half the population, half the students, and it was kind of a culture shock for us, So sophomore year, football. Couldn't end up wrestling because I didn't wrestle my freshman year due to a surgery. And when you transfer, you can only play the same sport from the year before. So I got football in my sophomore year. Junior year, so everything was pretty simple sophomore year, but junior year is where it started to kind of get rough. I started to get that attitude, that punk kid. I didn't have much discipline, and we were doing a camp up at Ohio Northern, and me and the head coach kind of went toe to toe. And he said some things that you definitely don't say to a 17-year-old, but at the time I didn't have the discipline to just shut my mouth, and I kind of popped off. We went back and forth. He said, get off the field. I went back to the dorm, slammed my helmet, was like, that's it. Nobody's speaking to me like that. I quit. I'm done. F him. It's over. And I kind of just drew that line in the sand. And like I said, man, that's probably one of my biggest regrets to today.
Really?
Because that was the first time that I'd ever actually just up and quit something. I didn't have the wherewithal for it, Granted, it's a grown man talking to a 17-year-old, but at the same time, like, you've got to have discipline. You've got to understand that sometimes people don't mean what they say, and it's in the heat of passion and stuff. So junior year, though, didn't play football, but I ended up my wrestling career. I got back to it because I went through the surgery, couldn't wrestle sophomore year. So junior year, it was wrestle. One of me and my best friends, we were just side by side through the whole season. End of the season rolls around. We actually got a new head coach. Coach Waz came to me and was like, Mike, will you play for us? We'd love to have you back, man. We'll do whatever, so, and I loved that because I was with my best friends again. I was doing the summer camps and everything. That fall rolled around. I got 2 or 3 games in, and then me and a buddy got into some would call it trouble. I call it small town dramatics, man. It was very just drama driven, and it was dumb. Long story short, again, Mike Doyle being, my mom always said growing up, Mike does what Mike wants. I got pissed off. He's like, well, I don't need this school. I don't need this town. I'm 18 years old next week. I'll just go back to Central Crossing. So then I left all of my good friends and went back to Central, which is a larger school, just more ruckus, I guess is the best way to explain that. And now at that point, I didn't have sports. school was never an aspiration to me, so I wasn't thinking going and getting a 4-year degree or anything like that. Nobody else in my family had gone, so then at that point it really turned into really living day to day, partying, doing stuff that I shouldn't have been around, people that I shouldn't have been around.
So do it, like you said, doing whatever you wanted to do.
100%.
What kind of consequences do you think that would bring? Because obviously you don't do that now, in a way. You do it in a different way. You do what you think is right from a principle point of view. But back then, what kind of consequences did it bring to your life?
Yeah, man. So there were some times that I stumbled and, just truly wrong crowd, wrong place, wrong time, shouldn't have been there. And the wake-up call for me was I got into some petty trouble and found myself in the back of a cop car. And I was like, having to call mom and dad, at 4 o'clock in the morning and say, hey guys, I did something that I shouldn't have been doing and I need help. That I think was like, I don't want to call it rock bottom, but essentially that. But it was a huge wake-up call. I wasn't doing anything violent or anything like that. I was being a young, dumb kid around young, dumb kids. And but that was a huge wake-up call for me, because today who I am, is night and day to the kid that I was then. Like I said, I never had that discipline. I never had goals. I never had aspirations. So, and that was, right after high school, which was kind of a wake-up call. So graduated in 2012, and that happened at the end of 12, beginning of 13, right in there. So 2013, Dad was like, hey, I've been down the path that you're going down, and I can promise you it's not what you want to do. Like I've told you before, Dad was always about, hey, I want you kids to have better for yourselves, better for your families. So that was a huge wake-up call for me, man. And thank God it wasn't something serious. Thank God it was a slap on the wrist at the end of the day, nothing crazy. So that was kind of my, I guess you would say, turning point at that point. And that would have been, like I said, around 2013. So turned over about a year, working kind of dead-end jobs, just trying to figure out like who I was, what do I want, what am I doing? Me and one of my best friends in 2014 actually got an apartment together, which Dylan and me, we're clicked. To this day, we're still really good friends. We don't talk as much, just being busy, but he was, doing his thing, working his job, getting into his career, but we were still, 22 years old. So like we wanted to go out to the bars and hang out and chase women and do all these things. And that's kind of what the goal was. And like I said, so that would have been 2014. And I'll never forget this date, June 30th, 2015. My doctor looked me in the eyes and was like, hey man, you are 22 at the time, 22-ish. You're 340 pounds and you're pre-type 2 diabetic. And just like the glass shattered, reality hit me, and I was just like, dude, who are you and what are you doing? And then that's actually the first time that I ever thought, all right, in 10 years, what's this look like? I'm living for today, but in 10 years, if I live for today just like this for the next 10 years, where do I end up? And I was like, whoa. When do you grab the reins and kind of control that future? And I don't know what it is, but at the time I was working for Jake Burns' dad doing commercial painting. And that was, really my gig out of high school. He helped me out, and I said, man, I got to pay rent and for a car and stuff. And he's like, hey, start slapping paint and I'll pay you weekly. So I'd always been in manual labor, but I had a good buddy of mine that reached out and was like, hey, I think pipe fitting, I'm with FSP, man, I make good money. You should come over and check it out. So he actually kind of did me a favor, got me in front of the owners. I got a job. I'm doing sprinkler fitting in commercial buildings. So to me, I was like, this is a step up. Now, I was like, man, I could chase foreman, I could get to the bigger money. So I kind of had some aspirations. Well, at that time, the day that the doctor, they were about right in line. I think I started FSP in July, and like I said, June 30th was when I got that pre-diabetic, call. The day that happened, man, I bought a gym pass, told myself, like, this is it. This is the turning point. I'm getting a new career. I'm getting a new diet. I'm getting a new workout in. And
what do you think was different? Because obviously you had in school that moment where you that you regret heavily right now in football, you quit it. And then obviously when you found yourself in the back of a cop car, that was also a sort of a turning point. But yet even after that, you kind of didn't change anything.
Yep.
But now this moment when the doctor's looking in your eyes and saying that you are type 2 pre-diabetic, what is different this time that forced you to change? What do you think was different there that kind of actually changed you?
I mean, I think so. I changed in two ways. The day that I got stuck into the back of a cop car, I knew that I didn't want to be a criminal. I didn't want to be the person that people couldn't trust. You know, that people were like, man, don't leave your wallet by that guy. Don't, you know, I can't trust this guy. I didn't want that, and I knew that. So that day is when that changed. Health-wise, I mean, man, it's a real deal when you're 21 years old and a doctor's like, hey, you have a disease that's your fault, you know, coming on. You're not taking care of your body. You're drinking. You're not working out. You're not doing anything that's beneficial for your health. And again, you know, I had that thought of, well, where do I want to be in 10 years? In 10 years, if I keep this up, I'm going to be 420 pounds now, and definitely type 2 diabetic. And, you know, and my dad had always been a big guy. So I guess that was also part of my wake-up call, was that I didn't want that. You know, he wanted better for me. He wanted me to be better, so I need to be better. So like I said, that day, man, it was ground turkey, rice, tuna packets, egg whites, and hot sauce. And that was about all that was in my diet. Now, obviously, breakfast, lunch, dinner, snacks, and stuff like that throughout the day. But just went on a mission. I lost about 110 pounds over that next year and a half. So while that was going on and I'm on this mission to lose this weight, I was actually doing the pipe fitting gig at the time. As that was progressing, I just kind of noticed that there was a couple guys that around me that were making like 17, 18 at the time, and I was at 15. And you know, like as a foreman, you can make 25 to 30 an hour. So that's where I wanted to be, but I kind of just sat back one day and I now started getting into reading. You know, books were big to me. And I just was like, man, there's more to this. And one day I looked at an invoice and saw what I was being paid and what the company was being paid. And I was like, a little discrepancy there. So I got this, like I said, Mom always said, well, Mike does what Mike wants to do. And I was on the job one day. We were doing an apartment out in Circleville. And I'm actually still buddies with Donnie, who was our foreman at the time. He was actually one of my first real estate clients. But I told Donnie, like, man, I need more money. And he was like, put your foot down, go say something. So I talked to the owners, and Ron was like, oh, okay, Mike, we hear you. We're going to get with HR. We'll let you know. I'm like, okay. So the next day I'm on the job. I'm actually headed into the job, and it was about a 40-minute drive, and our HR guy calls me. He's like, Mike, I talked to Ron this morning, and we're going to give you a raise. We'll give you $17 an hour, $2 bump, but you don't get another raise with us. I'm like, what? I'm like, what do you mean, dude? I want to be here for a long time and grow with you guys, and I just don't get another raise. And it was just a big corporate smack in the mouth. You know, it was, you get what you'll get. That day I picked up my tool bucket, threw it in the Jeep, and I was done.
Really? So as you have this moment where you are changing your health habits, is there anything else that you're changing besides just trying to move up and get a little bit more money? Or is there like a shift of looking at life in a different way?
Oh yeah, man. So like I said, me and one of my best friends at the time had an apartment, and I just realized that the course I was on, I didn't want to be on anymore. You know, I needed to do better for me and for my future. So there was, I mean, for probably a good year and a half there that me and Dylan had lived together, you know, they would be, because some of our friends were a little bit younger than us, but they were partying, and I mean, it was a 2-bedroom, living room, kitchen apartment, all one floor. So I mean, it'd be 2 o'clock in the morning and they have a party raging outside, you know, doing what they want, having fun. And, you know, I was in my bedroom by 10 o'clock with a cup of green tea and a book, you know, not because I wanted to do that. It was just that I knew mentally something needed to change, physically something needed to change. The course that I was on just wasn't working, and I just, I took that step. You know, that's one thing I've learned in life, man, through all of these things, through being in a cop car, through quitting sports, through, you know, the health thing. Nothing changes until you change. You've got to take the step. There's so many times in life that we're presented with the opportunity to take a leap, that either fear gets in our way, or, you know, whatever the reason may be, that we just don't take that leap. And I can say, hindsight looking back, if I wouldn't have taken some of the leaps that I've taken, I would not be where I am today.
What do you think is the main driving force of that change that you had? I mean, would you say it's discipline, or what do you think is the key component to have somebody change their life like that?
I've always been a firm believer, man, that you in life are not going to do anything until you wake up and see it. You have to become realistic to your current situation. You know, whether that's being obese, you know, being a drug addict, being in a bad relationship. You know, I cannot make somebody leave a relationship that they don't realize. He could or she could beat the other person day in and have a verbally aggressive, but until that person wakes up and goes, no more, nothing changes. And I think there is a bit of discipline in there, but I think some of it is,
It almost seems like a form of humility. You have to kind of recognize that what you think is not right. It's not lining up with reality, and you need to kind of wake up and say, oh, my life is a lot different than what I perceive it in my mind it is. And so now you need to act according to reality. And so your reality was that you can't just keep on going on with chasing all these things, because it's going to hurt you negatively with your health, and later on, who knows what.
Well, and I think too, in reality, man, that when I'm looking at it, it's like, what does this life pay me besides bad health, bad finances? You know, what are the goals here? You know, I wasn't growing every day, and if you're not growing, you're dying. Literally, I can tell you firsthand that I was not growing, and a doctor said, hey, your health is depleting. You're 22 years old, man, and you're looking at a disease that you have to take a needle every day, and it is your fault. It's nobody else's fault but yours. And I had to have that wake up. You know, how many people out there that get that conversation like, tomorrow, the next day, one more meal. So yeah, man, I think a little bit of humility with a little bit of discipline it can take you far in life.
That's interesting. And I think another key lesson to learn from this is responsibility, taking responsibility for your actions. And I think that's the main difference between a boy and a man. A boy will just, like a kid, he just does whatever he wants, and he doesn't take responsibility for it because somebody else will do it, or it just doesn't look that far ahead. But a man looks and says, this action I have is going to make this consequence, and I'm going to take responsibility for that.
Absolutely.
I think that's a very important thing for anybody that wants to do anything in their life, to take responsibility. So you had these moments, you're kind of growing, you just recently left that job, as you mentioned. You picked up your tools, you left because you didn't want to have somebody over you telling you you don't deserve to get more even though you produce more.
Exactly.
So where is life going there now? You've just lost your job, essentially. Where is it going now?
So I'll never forget it, man. Walked back into the apartment. I was like, Dylan, I quit my job today, dude. I walked off. He's like, you're crazy. You got, what do you mean? You don't got a job? So panic sets in afterwards. You know, you do the big bad thing. You think you're driving home. You're like, I proved them. And I knew in my heart that I was doing the right thing. I knew that there was something bigger for me to do. And that was, I guess, the day that the thought of being my own boss kind of became a thing. Started valeting cars, $10 an hour downtown at the Marriott.
And that's only because you just needed a job, right?
Needed cash. Yeah, we've got rent that's due. I've got a car payment that's due. I got to, eat, pay my gym membership.
Because that doesn't necessarily align with I want to be my own boss.
Yeah, man. So, but I actually at the time had a buddy that reached out and was like, hey man, I saw it, because I posted on Facebook and, anyone looking to hire and stuff. And my buddy Ross reached out and was like, man, I'm doing this thing while I'm doing school and stuff. It's awesome. It's, good cash, all, campus kids. So I found myself sitting in a, hotel parking lot with a book and a jug of water and tuna packets every day. Like I said, a lot of these kids were going for like graduates and stuff like that, but they're still party animals, Ohio State campus students. And a lot of them I still follow on social media and stuff today, but everyone was kind of chasing their own path, which was cool. But for me, I was in this weird spot. I'm like, man, I'm surrounded by all these kids with 4-year degrees, looking to have a bachelor's or a master's, and what am I doing? What's my next thing? And through books, something just hit me that it was real estate. Real estate was something that just drew my attention. So I actually was talking to Jake Burns at the barber shop, who to this day is like a brother to me. And I was like, man, I think real estate's my calling card. And he was like, man, I actually cut a guy, Jermaine, short dude, talking about buying a Tesla, and I'm pretty sure he's good at real estate. Let me link you up with him. So I'm like, dude, absolutely. Jake gives me Jermaine's number. Whole time I'm still valeting cars. Shoot Jermaine a text one day. I was like, man, I'd love to meet you and sit down. Jake pointed me in your direction. Hopefully we can talk sometime. So I'll never forget, I was on 4th Street running to get a new car, and I see Jermaine calling me, and I'm like, stop. This dude's got a Tesla, so he knows what he's talking about. Take the phone call. We talked for about 5-10 minutes. I got in trouble because they're like, where were you at? And I told him, I was like, hey man, I had to take a call. But me and Jermaine talked. He's like, hey, let's get together sometime. I'm starting a real estate team. And this would have been right around the end of 2015, beginning of 16, I think is when me and Jermaine kind of linked up. But it was just funny because that phone call, 2 days later, I'm at the barber shop getting cut by Jake, and in walks this dude that I saw on Facebook, bright smile, short black guy, and just in a great mood. And I was like, Jake, is that Jermaine? And he's like, yeah, it's funny, man, that is. I didn't even plan on you guys being in here together. So, I was like, hey, Jermaine, Mike Doyle, we talked on the phone and everything. He's like, oh, dude, let's go grab lunch. He actually let someone cut. And I'm sure you remember those days at the barbershop where it was like a line. Yeah. There wasn't appointments.
I waited 3 hours once.
Dude, yes. And Jermaine just gave up his spot, which was big to me right there. Because if anyone that has been at the barbershop at that time knew that it was a struggle to get in. So we went across the street. We had Subway. We talked about, his story, where he came from, where I was at, where I wanted to go. And he was just like, hey, man, like, you seem like you got a good head on your shoulders and you know what you want. Check this book out. He recommended it. It was called Work by Referral by Brian Buffini. And at the time, like I said, man, I was so invested in the book. So I was like, cool, done. And a week later, I was like, man, that was a great book. I loved it. And I think that's where he really was like, okay, this kid's going to do the stuff that I, recommend and point him in the right direction. He's got a good head, let's invest in him. So he told me, he's like, hey, man, start saving your money up. $10 an hour valeting is really not cutting it. So at the time, one of my good, still today best friends, Letty, he reached out and was like, hey man, holiday season at Best Buy is coming up. I think you could be a salesman. We were actually standing in line to go into a bar one night when he said this. I'll never forget it. And he's like, dude, come work for me. It'd be awesome. So started at Best Buy as a salesman, while at the same time I was like, man, screw it. Again, took that step. I think
did whatever Jermaine told you.
Yeah, and at that time, I think real estate classes were about $2,000, and I was like, screw it, man, Discover. I'll pay it off. The first week I get my real estate license, I'll be rich. So put it on Discover. So then at this time, I'm doing my real estate classes. I'm working at Best Buy full time, still in the gym heavy, trying to, at this point, I'd probably been down to like 240s, 250s. So like I was in great shape. I was strong. Now I'm like, making okay money. I'm in great shape. I'm starting to notice that that's what women are attracted to, being in good shape and having some money. So I started to realize, man, that the path that I was on of the the W-2 of like the 10 to 9 was just crushing me. And I think a lot of that had to do with like me not wanting to go to school. I went to Columbus State for 3 weeks right out of high school. I was like, nope. Can't do this.
I'm kind of listening and I'm observing one thing is, one thing you've been learning, as I can see over the years, is that taking initiative and actually taking responsibility and doing something moving forward. And I think that's an interesting lesson, because you weren't in school, you weren't like in college, and you weren't there with somebody telling you do this, do that. You kind of had to figure out for yourself. Yeah. And you figured out at first that what you were doing was wrong. It was not helpful, but then you started doing what was helpful. And it kind of, it's interesting, the people that go to college, like they're in a 4-year degree, they're in the system, they're being told what to do, and while they're there, they will do what's necessary. But as soon as they get out, if they don't learn that responsibility, which you learned early on, they will be in the same position you were those years before, even high school or college, because that's what matters when you're out in the real world. Unless you go into the corporate world and you just live until the rest of your life doing something that's somebody else telling you what to do.
Absolutely, man.
So I think that's a very valuable lesson.
Yeah, I guess I never really looked at it at that point. From like the time that the doctor said, hey, type 2 diabetic, to the day that I met Jermaine, I didn't have a mentor, guidance or anything like that. And it was, I can tell you, and I've watched thousands of hours of YouTube videos. And the one that I watched in the video, Will Smith said, hey, any problem that you're ever dealing with, somebody somewhere wrote it down in a book. Go find that book, read it, and find the answer. And that's when I picked up The Alchemist. And that book, I think was a huge turning point for me, because it's all about finding your personal destiny. And I was like, man, there's something here, So that's when I really got into books and stuff. But nobody was like, hey, read this, go do this.
Until you met Jermaine.
Exactly, until I had met Jermaine. And then at that point, it was basically Jermaine was just starting to serve me up things that I would already been doing, reading a lot, trying to be better, trying to figure out how money works, realizing that, hey, there's leverage in money. You can do a lot in life and have freedom. And that was what stood out to me with Jermaine. Once I started really rubbing elbows, I'm like, does this dude work? How does he own this Tesla? Like, he's always in, the most upbeat mood, always very positive, go lucky. And the entire time that I was with him, it was always, don't worry to work out. Don't worry to work out. If it doesn't work out, it wasn't supposed to. And I think that was huge for me, because I've always, and still to this day, kind of get anxious about things. So Jermaine was always there to kind of keep me grounded, and especially getting real estate, man, it is crazy. Yeah, man, Jermaine was the probably the mentor-wise, the biggest turning point that I've ever had, because now I had the initiative, I had the want to, I had all of these things and, the discipline, but I didn't have guidance. I didn't know what was going on, man. And the biggest blessing I think I have to this date when it comes to my career is the day that I met Jermaine.
So you're in Subway with him.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's that day or somewhere along those times he hands you that first book, which one?
Work by Referral by Brian Buffini.
So how did things move forward from there?
So, still punching the clock at Best Buy. This would have been 2017 was when I started my classes finally. It was end of 16, beginning of 17. Bit the bullet, put it on the card, and was like, I'm starting classes. Well, at this time, I actually met a girl at one of my good friends' Halloween party. That young fling, hitting her up. She's like, yeah, cool, thanks, no thanks, man. Like, you're in the friend zone, and I just never accepted that. So like while I'm doing all these things, like I kind of had my eyes set, and it was January 2017, me and Caden had got together, and it was, I think, January or February when I started my classes. So like a whole bunch of changes going on now. I'm like, hold on, now I'm in class again, I'm in a relationship, I'm working a structured job. It's like, all right, things are on the up, we're getting better. So started my classes. While I'm going through those, she's supported me a lot financially, man, which was, we were young. She was a tech while she was going into nursing school at the time. So 2017 happens. Finally, March of 2017, I passed my real estate classes. I was on cloud nine. The world was over, man. Like I was like, dude, I am a boss now.
You're rich now.
I am rich. March 30th, I bought my Chrysler 300, worst investment I've ever made in my life. But I was like, man, I was like, dude, 30 grand, I can have this thing paid off in like a year. It did not work that way.
Not to mention the new laptop you bought.
Yeah, so I needed the MacBook Pro, I needed all these things for business. And that was when I realized, I guess hindsight, I've realized that it's not the stuff that you buy, it's the work that you put in.
Yeah, I mean, that's a temptation. When you want to start something new, you're on the emotional hype. You think that just getting all the best things, just buying all these things, getting the best business cards, the t-shirts, whatever it may be, that's going to be what's going to start your business off. And in reality, it's not any of that.
Yeah, and I mean, I learned real quick, you don't want to start a business in a hole. You do not want to start a business, and that was Jermaine. And afterwards, Jermaine's like, oh, hold on, how much did you spend on that MacBook? I was like, yeah, but man, I needed the one with the touch bar so that when I'm typing, and he's just looking at me like, oh, dude. So finally get my license. That first year in 2017, I sold 2 houses. One was a $60,000 cash deal that I still have framed today. My commission was $608. And I was like, okay, maybe these are going to get bigger over time. Second one was a gentleman that is, he was always like family to me. It was actually Jake's uncle. He was my second client ever, and that was like a 117. And it was just, to me, then I was like, man, somebody that I respect and that I love trusted me with their biggest purchase. Okay, maybe I'm doing something right. So I told Jermaine, I was like, hey man, I only
that kind of goes back to when you said, when you were in the back of the cop car, one thing you didn't want is to be that person people don't trust. And now a couple years later, you're now being trusted with the biggest purchase, not just their wallet, but now their biggest purchase.
Yeah, Tim, way to make me realize that one, man. I guess I never put that into perspective, but you're very right. So yeah, stepping into 2018, December of 17, Caden tells me she's pregnant. And I'm like, whoa, hold on. I wasn't supposed to be a dad yet. I was checking the calendar. I'm like, hey, we didn't have this planned. But I had that little click that was like, dude, you can do this. You got a great job. You're on the right path. You just need to stay focused. So like there was definitely some anxiety there, but there was excitement too, I think. And nervousness and all of that played a role. But so fast forward to March of 18. I'm on the sales floor. Working with one of your best friends is the hardest thing that you can do in a business like that, in like a Best Buy setting. Because he was the manager and there was things that, I didn't agree upon. So like I would be vocal with him. We just kind of were butting heads. And I was like, man, like our friendship is starting to hurt at this now. So I put in my 2 weeks. March, it was 1 week after St. Patrick's Day of 18. So it was just weird because, you know, I put in my 2 weeks. So now.
But real estate's not, and you realize real estate's not like, you're not instantly
Yeah.
rich, so it's not like you're in a very comfortable position right now.
And there was just, man, there were so many things going on at that time. Caden's mom was actually on her hospice with cancer. So me and Caden, I wanted her to spend every moment that she could with her mom. And I was like, listen, if we have to move in with your parents for the next, you know, time being, let's do it. And she was, and loved it, you know, obviously wanted to be there with her mom. And that was something that I would never give up, because she got to spend every last second with her mother up until she passed. Well, at this time, Caden is 7 months pregnant. Caden's mom passes. 2 months later, we have our son. So there's so much going on in our lives. And at the same time, I just quit my full-time job to do a job that I only sold 2 houses last year. But again, that was one of those times where, and I'll never forget it, I was leaning against a counter, sitting on the sales floor, and I was like, dude, this is it. It's do or die, Mike. You're either going to be a realtor or you're going to be a Best Buy salesman. What do you want to do? And I took that step. And I didn't even really check with Kate, and I just kind of called her on the way home like, hey, I don't work at Best Buy anymore. And she's like, shut up. I'm like, nah, babe, just trust me. I got this. I got this. And so that's really when the grindstone hit. And like I said, that would have been about middle of 18. So then, like I said, 17, 2 sales, 2018, 9 sales for $16,000 in commission. Plus I'd made about $10,000, I think, at Best Buy at that time. So I made like around 30 grand. 2019 was really when I started to see things pick up. Did 21 transactions, walked away with about 80,000 on the real estate side. But in the meantime, Jermaine had started Mission. So now I'm an insurance agent part-time, but so that one helped me, and it was giving me, you know, a couple thousand here and there that was really helpful. But 2019 was where I was like, okay, 21 deals, I've made 80,000 in real estate. That's better than most people make in a year. Awesome, like I'm doing this. But I wasn't satisfied. You know, I knew, like, I just felt like I'm not at my peak. And even now I didn't feel that way. And Jermaine was like, dude, you're 2.5 years into this. Like, keep doing what you're doing, but do it more now, do it better. Find ways to add more value. And at the same time, I was reading all these books, but my health now, we've had all these things going on. Our son's now here. I'm making decent money. My health started to kind of trickle off. I wasn't going to the gym. I wasn't eating the right things. So, and that went on through 2019.
You started getting comfortable again?
100%, man. And Jake explained it perfectly. He was like, man, you made some money, got fat and happy. And I said, dude, you ain't lying, man. I was so disciplined in business, but I didn't have any balance.
Well, that's kind of an interesting thing. So you started out in real estate. That moment when you quit the Best Buy job, you, at this point, the prior year, only made 2 transactions. You quit this job, you're going into real estate. You're in survival mode, right? You have that's your main motivation. You're trying not to die, quote unquote. But like a couple years later, you're kind of making good money now, and you've come to a point where you need to reevaluate your motivation, because survival is no longer a good motivator. You're not surviving anymore.
Bingo.
So what is this new motivation that's going to get you through this next couple of years until now?
So a lot of it was my son. You know, now having somebody that, and Kaden at the time, she was still working, but I was like, and Jermaine will always attest to this, I've always been like the man's man. I need to pay everything. I need to take care of my family. I need to be the breadwinner. So that turned into my motivation then, because obviously it wasn't women and partying and stuff like that. Now it was family and success. And then I've kind of always had this thing in the back of my head that it's like, man, you've seen the light. You can't go back now. You know, you've got to stay this path. You know exactly what it takes. And if I were to turn around, and not that there's anything against a W-2, that's a very structured career. And if you do it in the right way, you can create a lot of freedom with that. But for me, it was like, man, I'm my own boss right now. There's no way I can see me ever putting in an application again. You know, again, nothing against that, but it was just me personally. I was like, man, I want to call the shots day in and day out. At the end of the day, what the profit and loss says, what the hours worked are, that's on me. I want to be the one that's responsible for it, because I want to manifest my own destiny.
It goes back to the responsibility of a man.
100%, yeah. So 2019 had a great year, man. I was on top of the world. You know, my son's now a year and some change. We had him July of 18. So he's about a year now, year and a half. But I'm like worried. So end of 2019, great year. 2020, January or February, Jermaine comes to me and is like, hey man, we're out. We're leaving Signature. we're going to EXP Realty. And I'm like, well, hold on, man. Gary and Terry are amazing people. They've done so much for me. I love these people, you know, like you can go, man, I'm staying here. That was probably one of the hardest decisions that I've had to make in business. And I'd be a liar if I said there wasn't times that I was on the verge of tears, because Gary was like, I mean, I can still say he was a huge influence for me, just how he ran his business, who he was. We're both huge Pittsburgh fans, and you know, Terry, they're just such an amazing people to this day. I love them, but that was hard for me. I was like, man, I don't want to, I'm comfortable here. Everything's going good. Why change it? And he was like, look, man, like I'm telling you, running the team, you know, the stuff that we have, there's some powerful stuff here. And again, you know, I kind of just went on a limb and was like, Jermaine, you got me this far. You better be right, dude. And I'll never forget, we were sitting in my driveway at our house in his Tesla, and I was like, dude, you better be fucking right about this, because I am putting all my eggs in the basket again and letting you carry it. So hindsight, amazing decision. You know, I think that's also something that I've realized is having a mentor is a very, very powerful thing. Very powerful. And having multiple is a thing too. You know, you don't have to just have one mentor. I've had several that I can attribute a lot of success to, but so 2020 hit. So we are leaving the brokerage that we're comfortable with.
I was going to mention that you realized that we said it's good to have good mentors. That's kind of a form of humility, to realize that I don't know everything. There's people that have done this better or are farther ahead than I am, and that they can teach me something. And you mentioned earlier that that was one of the things that helped you change in your life, to realize that what I'm doing in my life is not the right way. The habits that I have in terms of eating, that was kind of like the first phase of taking responsibility and realizing that actually I don't know everything, and what I thought I knew was right wasn't right. It was producing bad results. And I think this is a kind of a, I don't know if it's a step two, but it's another level of, I still don't know everything, because nobody does. And going back to the Will Smith thing, where somebody already has the answer, you just need to go find it.
Bingo. Yeah, man, I mean, you're right. Humility, I guess, hindsight looking at everything is huge, because to this day, I tell everyone that I'm with, you know, even agents, I'm like, you have to take something from every single person that you meet, whether it's that dude that was in a terrible mood at the gas station, you know, you can still take something from that. And in that aspect, it's, hey, is that guy having a bad day? Did he lose a family member? Did his dog get hit yesterday? Versus, you know, pushing back on him. So you've got to take little bits and pieces from everybody and grow as a person. You know, and I know some people that are totally opposite of that. And it's like, hey, man, a millionaire could say, hey, 1, 2, 3, these are the steps. And you're like, oh, okay, but what if we change this on 1 and this on 2? And I'm like, dude, just shut up and do what they said, man. You can manipulate things in your own way, but take what they said. They're probably right if they're in that successful of a position, and then adapt to it. But like you said, you've got to have that humility to be like, hey, maybe this guy's right and I'm wrong. Maybe he's onto something that I wasn't aware of. Yeah, absolutely.
So, and then you were saying in 2020, that's how things started to change when you moved to EXP.
So not only are we leaving our small mom and pop brokerage that I loved and going to this huge, you know, commercial or corporate brokerage, COVID hits. And I'm like, the world is about to fall apart. We are at a new broker that we don't know. The whole world is now shutting down. So panic sets in, because I'm like, man, again, I don't have a 4-year degree. Like, what am I going to do if real estate fails? So like, even to this day, I always have that little bit of fear in the back of my mind. And I think that's a big factor in my motivation. You know, you've got to have, like you said, a little bit of humility that this isn't forever. This isn't given. You've got to take it, you know, appreciate, I should say, every single second of being it, because I love what I do, Tim. I truly, and anyone that's worked with me or around me knows that I'm very passionate about helping people, adding value, because Jermaine taught me day one that work by referral book is all about relationships. You know, you can run a business transaction based, or you can run it referral based. Well, transactions, you are always chasing that next one. Relationships, the first person I ever sold a house to is still in my database. You know, I still follow up with them. Because I want that relationship. You know, I want it to be a longevity thing to where, and they still do call me and they say, hey, the bathroom toilet's leaking, who do we call? You know, I'm not a plumber, I'm not Angie's List, but they know that they can come to me and trust me that I'm going to give them somebody that's reputable and that I trust. So again, that's just an extension of referrals. You know, I'm referring this person, so when they call Joe the plumber, they are like, Joe, Mike said great things about you, man. When could you be out to the house? Not what your price is. What's this? Because there's that trust there. So Relationships, I think, are huge in business, man.
So how did you react to like the new brokerage, then COVID hits? What did you do to overcome that?
Got to work. I mean, that was the biggest thing for me, man. I seen so many agents that were like, oh, I can't do this, or this is limiting me, or this is this. And I'm like, dude, the world is what it is right now. You can either use that as an excuse to sit down and not get to work, or you can pull up your bootstraps and deal with it. You know, I kind of always look back to the agents that were still successful during the crash. I'm like, you know, how many agents fell out of the business? But there were those ones that were like, no, we're going to adapt and we're going to overcome. We'll work with 1,000 investors. We'll do, you know, foreclosures and REOs and, you know, all these things. So you just got to be able to adapt. And I can truly say 2020 was my best year to date, hands down. 43 transactions, 190,000 in real estate commission. You know, looking back, I was like, man, I almost let the fear get me at the beginning of this year, you know? So 2020 was a big wake-up call for me, man, that even when the world goes crazy, you just got to stay your course, keep working, and know what your end goal is.
Mm-hmm. And for myself personally, and I think a lot of people can attest to this, 2020 taught everybody that you can plan, you can do whatever you want, but you're not in control.
Yeah.
You're not the god of this universe. You're just a little person, and you just have to take responsibility for what you can.
Yep.
and work with what you have.
Exactly, man. And I always 2020, I think of Mike Tyson's quote, and I think he said, you know, everybody's a tough guy until you get punched in the mouth.
Or everybody's a plan until they get punched.
That's what it is. Everybody has a plan until they get punched in the mouth. And that's it. You know, when you get hit, what are you going to do? Are you going to curl up? Are you going to, you know, grit, grind down, and get things done? And that's one thing that, you know, again, Jermaine showed me, you know, through the whole thing, we were very active. We were out. We did as much as we possibly could. Yeah, the market was tough, but, you know, like I said, I hit a personal record, and I know a lot of agents that did, but there's still agents that are like, oh man, you know, 2020 was my worst year yet, COVID, and I'm just like, man, like, you could have done more than you did, I think. But don't get me wrong, there were people that had health issues and health scares, and, you know, having pre-existing conditions and stuff definitely, I'm sure, affected some agents. But yeah, man, when times get tough, you've got to be tougher. You just got to have that wherewithal.
So what would you say to what would Mike Doyle today, or even at the end of 2020, having reached his personal record, what would he say to the younger Mike Doyle, maybe in the back of the cop car, or maybe even the moment when you walked off that football team, not showing perseverance? What would you say to that younger person?
I mean, I guess hindsight, man, looking back, talking to a younger me, I would tell them that there's several things that they need to instill in their life at that time. One, I think the biggest being discipline. Two, like you keep saying, humility. You know, you're not always right, man. You're not the tough guy. There's always somebody that's tougher than you, smarter than you, bigger than you, badder than you. Accept it and grow as much as you possibly can. And I think the last thing would be take that step. Take that leap. You're scared. You know, it's not promised, but this life is way too short, man. You know, how many people do we lose at young ages and in unexpected conditions? Man, don't live with regret. You know, that's I can truly say the only thing in my life that I firmly regret is stepping off of that football field and not sticking to it. You know, but at the same time, that's made me who I am today. Every single person, every single thing that I've encountered in the last 27 and some change years has put me in this chair right here. And I'm grateful for every single bit of it.
That's awesome. Praise God. I'm wondering, looking back now, what about looking forward? I know today we announced that you opened the new team, but what are your plans and aspirations moving forward? We've gone through COVID, or more or less. We've reached personal records. What are you thinking about moving forward?
I guess for me, man, it's one, obviously, get to the top. You know, I want my team to get to the top, and I don't mean that in the aspect of being the #1 producer in Columbus. That's not my goal. I want to be in the top 10, top 5. You know, I obviously have those goals, but I just want my team to be full of people that are just like I was with Jermaine, that were kind of in a situation that they weren't, you know, sure about. They're stepping into a career that they don't know about. Jermaine has given me this life, man, in the aspect of showing me the guidance to get here. And I just kind of wanted to embody that. And I told him, man, every single thing that you've done for me, I think it's now time for me to pass that torch to somebody else. You know, Joey, being that when I was still on Jermaine's team about a year ago, Joey kind of came to me, and was that he calls me and says, hey man, I really think I want to get into real estate. And me and Joey we'd only like kind of partied together through him being at OU and stuff, and we hadn't talked in 4 or 5 years. And he calls me, and that was Joey having humility, going, hey man, I really like what you're doing. Could you sit down with me and like talk? And I was like, Joey, I'd love to sit down.
I remember this was something similar I went through.
Yeah, and when we sat down, I'm expecting us to go to Average Joe's, grab a beer, and BS about real estate. And we sit down, and he's got his notebook, he's got his pen, and I just see, I think he had like 17 or 18 long questions wrote out. And I'm like, yo, I was not ready for this, Joe. And but we had a great conversation. It clicked. That was the first time that I'd ever saw somebody kind of come to me for guidance and advice. And just like I did for Jermaine, Joey bit right in. He read the books, he watched the videos, he did everything that me and Jermaine recommended. And we sat there, and Joey was like, look man, I'm selling insurance for a company that I don't want to be with. Bro, help me out. Like, can you guys get me a position with Mission? Could you do anything? Like, I just want to change my course. And I could truly see in his eyes that this was his turning point. And I'll never forget it. I said, Joe, he told me he needed $4,000 altogether. He did the math, said I need, $1,700 I think for real estate classes, $1,200 for my board fees, X amount set aside for this and this. So I was like, all right, Joe, you get $4,000. When you get $4,000, we'll give you a job at Mission Insurance. That'll be your part-time gig. We'll put you in a salaried role. While you're doing that, you do your real estate classes. Oh, bastard. That was on Friday. Monday, he calls me and goes, Mike, I got $4,000. And I'm like, what? I'm like, how? What? And he's like, I made it work, man. But I've got the money. I'm ready to go. So I called Jermaine. I'm like, listen, man, this dude kind of called my bluff. We've got to give him a job. And so Joey had started with us at Mission. He was kind of doing the hourly thing. He was our admin while going to school. So that's really when it hit me, and I was like, well, hold on, I can do this for other people, Now Joey's in a position where he's thanked me, and I tell him like, man, you put in the work. But just like I do to Jermaine, he's like, dude, thank you for the guidance. Thank you for being there when I needed somebody, because this is a tough business to really get into. But, I'll always be in Joey's corner. And I think that was a big reason that when I branched out and started my own team, which Jermaine fully supported, man, he was like, look, I think it's time. Joey was like, Mike, I want to go with you. I want to take this step. I trust you. You've helped me get this far. So future, grow the team. I don't want to grow super fast. I don't want to have 50 agents doing 3-4 deals a year. I'd rather have 10 agents doing 30-40 deals a year, and change lives, man. Yeah. But from here on out, it's working to get my money so I can leverage it for freedom. My goal is to retire by 40 years old, and I don't mean retire and go to Florida and play bocce ball.
Collect seashells.
Yeah, man. I mean retire as in knowing that between the companies that I've started, the things that I'm doing, we're creating passive income. Passive, I think, is huge. Every person that's in business needs to try to find some sort of a passive income, because that's going to pay the bills while you're sleeping. If you ain't making money while you're sleeping, you're always working. So, but end goal, man, just be happy and free. This could end tomorrow. It could end in 5 years. It could end in 10 years. We don't know. So that's where I've really learned from Jermaine that you've just got to appreciate every single second of this, man. Yeah, you may have had a bad day, but tomorrow could be better. I always kind of use this. I had a friend that lost his father when I was actually valeting at the time. And I kind of always looked at my dad, because my dad kind of sometimes will get into a negative mindset. And I'm like, I bet you Roger would love to have a bad day today, but he doesn't get to have a day, And I think that was a big wake-up call for me, that your worst day is better than somebody's best day. So you got to be grateful for what we've got, man. You've got to be thankful for every single day that we're here. And I'm learning that now, so the weight came back on, and I was like, whoa, gut check. Started 75 Hard, which is a program that I just did it because I said, I know the tools. I've lost 100 pounds before, but I put 75 back on through drinking and eating again. I lost that balance, and that's where I've now regained that balance. And now it's like aha moment. You can have all of these things if you just have the discipline to balance them. I need to give my family the right amount of allocated time. I need to give my fitness the right amount of allocated time, but also need to give my business that same fair amount of time. And it's always a work in progress to fix those. So
one kind of lesson I've noticed first in Jermaine with you, and then now with you and somebody like Joey or anybody else that's on your team, is kind of like how Christ died. If you want to be great, it's not about being on the top, untouchable, where you do whatever you want, but it's the ability to stoop down and to be able to help somebody. And that's what the definition of greatness is.
Yeah.
It's not just about you getting everything the way you want it to be, but it's being able to help others in a selfless way.
Man, and it's, Tim, it's funny because I saw this quote just yesterday. A friend of mine shared it on Facebook, and it was about Jonas. And is that what his name was?
Jonah?
Jonah.
In the whale?
Jonah. Yeah. So, well, just the story of like Jesus going to the final supper, and Jonas, I think is.
Oh, you're talking about Judah, the one that betrayed him?
Judah, yeah, that.
That's
and
Judah.
That was the story. My bad, I got those mixed up. But it was just crazy to me because the story basically breaks down, how Jesus knew what was going to happen when he walked into that room, but he fed everybody. Mm-hmm. He knew that there was, people that wanted to betray him in that room and do him wrong and, murder him, Well,
and Judah's betrayed him with a kiss.
Exactly. And it was just, I don't know, that was big to me because it said like, I can't fathom being in that position and being that selfless and loving other people so much to where even if they're going to hurt me, I'm still going to do good for you. Mm-hmm. And I guess today's verbiage is, kill them with a smile or whatever, kill them with kindness. But that was just, that was kind of another thing that I was like, yeah, man, you can always control what you do. You can't control what everyone else is going to do, but you can control yourself. Mm-hmm. You can control the actions that you make day to day, hour after hour, minute after minute.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, just complaining about the things that you don't like in your life will not fix anything.
Yep.
It's just going to be a matter of doing.
Yep. And I know that I'm far from perfect, man. It is a work in progress every day, but that's what life's about, right? Waking up every day to, try to grow and be better. Because like I said, if you're not growing, you're dying. So what are you going to do today and wake up? Is it read 5 pages of a book or drink extra water or, get that workout or take the step to quit that job, take the step to leave that relationship. Mm-hmm. Any of those things, you just got to love yourself.
Mm-hmm. So before we kind of finish off, for anybody that's listening to this and they're interested in not necessarily real estate as a realtor, but in general, they want to go out and take that leap of faith of working for themselves, being their own boss. Maybe they're at the brink of their breakthrough and they're kind of like, should I quit this job and mm-hmm. go full in? What kind of advice would you give to that person?
Just do it. Just do it. Tomorrow again is not promised. Have a plan, get a plan together, but put it into action because, if you're not going to, a dream is only going to be a dream if you don't start chasing it, Mm-hmm. And my goal, Tim, in all honesty, was to make $100,000. To me, $100,000 was a rich man. But the day that I hit that goal, it was like, whoa, we can keep going. This can get bigger, this can get better, it can grow because I'm aware of it. So, anyone that's got to take that step, it is the scariest, most daunting thing in your life right now. Just do it. Just go and do it.
And the other thing is the circumstances will never be perfect.
Ever.
And so you have to, like you said, you have to just do it.
Yeah. Like I said, man, I a son on the way, living at my father-in-law's house, 2 deals prior the year before. If I wouldn't have taken that step that day at Best Buy, that security, that that hourly paycheck, that 2 weeks it's there, if I wouldn't have taken that step, I wouldn't be on this couch right now. Mm-hmm.
You wouldn't have enough reason to kind of move forward and give everything mm-hmm. you have in real estate because you're always
Yep.
like, oh, I have Best Buy. Now that that's gone, there's no plan B.
Yep.
It's either you get it or...
It was sink or swim, baby.
But at the other hand, worst case scenario, mm-hmm. you can always go back to a job like Best Buy.
Bingo. The situation that you're in now, you can always get back to. Whether it's that job, don't get me wrong, that company may not bring you back, but you, like you said, you can always do what you're doing now again. Mm. But if you don't do that new thing, you're never going to get to it. And that's something that I think you're going to regret down the road. Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's
awesome. Well, Mike, thank you so much. I am fairly certain that anybody that listens to this will have a good learning experience. And it's always wise, like we mentioned today, that we don't know everything, and it's always good to learn from somebody else. That's the whole purpose of this podcast, listening to people's challenges and how they faced them, how they broke through them. So I thank you for your time today, and I look forward to seeing where you are in 5-10 years, wherever God would lead you.
Thanks, man. You as well, Tim. You guys, you deserve a lot of respect and appreciation as well with what you've done with Orange Visuals, the Breakthrough Podcast, and everything. And I can truly say, man, that you have helped me over the years bring my business a lot further than it would have went without you, brother. So thank you for having me, man, and I hope somebody out there can pick something up.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thanks, brother.